Today's episode is part two of our interview with Michael Kotchman. If you haven't had a chance to listen to part one, I would suggest going back and listening to that before diving into this one. Obviously, most of the people we're talking about are very well established, a lot of experience, right? If somebody's listening to this or watching this who's a little less experienced, maybe straight out of photo school, or maybe they're assisting early on or in the first couple of years of their career, trying to sort of build themselves up. What advice do you have for them in terms of maybe their book or their portfolio or just anything?
Um, Several things. Number one, shoot a lot, please. Um, I would think I think we talked about that Chris Buck quote. Like, if you want to be a more interesting photographer, become a more interesting person. I really do think that is key to some degree. When you're working with someone, you know that this person has seen this stuff. I loved sometimes going out to dinner with photographers and talking about French New Wave films, that just showed like there was a higher level of like visual thought going on. And I think become a more interesting person. I think you're going to have more to say. You're going to have more references to pull from. Your work is going to be richer, you know, just like talking to someone. This is a visual conversation. If you're having dinner with a Renaissance man, or are you having dinner with like someone that doesn't have a lot to say about anything. So fill your head with like, again, I think there has to be a balance between like being technically great, but I think, understand people a little bit. Again, practice, understand people, understand assignments, push yourself with regard to things, and maybe find a friend or a fellow art person that you can collaborate with. Because I do think, collaboration is a 1 + 1 = 3 thing, so, finding a collaborator could be really good. But, like one other thing that you can't teach is sort of taste and charisma and charm. I think photographers have to be, charming and, they have to have the trust of people, of the subject. Um, they have to like them. They have to feel like they're professional and charming and, I've known very cool photographers that took very interesting pictures, but there were some subjects. I remember being at the shoot early on in my time at EW, and the subject would be noticeably upset with him. It's sort of like, tell me what to do. You're not telling me what to do. And that was tricky, to hear that. And the photographer would sometimes get a little like flummoxed about it because he was used to just shooting very cool people and making a cool image. And yes, his technique was great. He had like great taste. And this is days shooting film, black and white film, and his prints could be gorgeous. Um, Early EW covers that were sometimes in black and white were really, really stunning. But there were some people that were frustrated, like, I'm just standing here, tell me what to do, you know? But actually, when I taught at Art Center, I would bring students to photo shoots, and they'd get in there, and I think everybody's so worried about the technical. They come in and they start looking at the lighting, and they're writing, like, sketching the where the beauty dishes are and where's the fill and what kind of lights they are. And I would say, all right, all that's good. That's true. But, like, Avedon's published his lighting, diagrams, and you're not Avedon, and he publishes her lighting. Art Striver these days, publishes his lighting diagrams. And that's because they're not them in a way. And it's so much more than just the lighting diagram. It's like what you get these people to do and how you get them to do it. That's a big factor. Um, but I would say, like, I would encourage them to, like, listen to the photographer talk to the subject. Listen to how he's directing him. Listen to how the photographer's telling him to stand and what to do, or how to work with this prop, or how to do this, or the encouragement. Oh, yes, that's beautiful. Sometimes it's a little, Austin Powers-ish, with British photographers, but that's fun. It's a means to an end. Um, there is a little bit of that. The great fashion photographers are generally very charming, very well dressed, very cultured men, that know fashion. They come in looking like $1 million, so they can tell someone, they get respect. It's a lot of those things. I just think, on a practical way, shoot a lot, experiment. But also, like, what do you like? Here's an easy thing. I mean, shoot what you love. Like, I think Jeremy does that. He loves sports, golf, and he's made that a big cornerstone of his career. And I think that's great. He's got a passion for it. And I think, for me, I loved, like, I sometimes thought of myself when I worked at EW as a bit of an entertainer. It's like I had a magazine that was read by 8 million people weekly, and I was given pages to fill, and those pages had to be fun. I had to come up with an idea with a photographer or whatever, execute something, whatever, but I was responsible for X, and I was going to entertain our readers, by giving them fun things. Tom Bergeron, we did a profile for him for like America's Funniest Home Videos, right? That's what he did,
Mhm.
didn't he, for
Yep.
years? And I think I did a shot of him, and I remember, like, they said, well, he's just a host. Maybe, one of the editors said, I said, what if I shoot him on a tennis court playing with little kids, and I have like the ball launcher hit him right in the crotch with one surrounding, like dropping the mic and grabbing it. And I remember she said, oh, that's kind of genius. You can do that? I said, yeah, like, we'll do that. And I had one kid like do that. So we staged that. So, like, that was my MO for a lot of things. I wanted to produce like an interesting piece of photography that was fun and witty and told a story. And I wanted to do that like at EW, I mean, I think I was good at inventing personas for people, for Sam B, for example, who no one really knew what it was. She was a correspondent on The Daily Show. She was very funny, but, she's mostly funny as a person on the street asking questions and such. And we had to develop a persona, a visual persona. What was her hook? And I thought of some things, for her that were good, that worked with body language and such, um, that were funny. But I do think, like, I liked doing that. That was an outgrowth of, creating characters. Um, what are they wearing? Building people up from the ground up, knowing that the directors do that as well when they work on characters. What's their backstory? What are their, what's their way into a character? I always had that in mind. So I think, like, you have to give a little thought about like what you want to do. I mean, and what's your strength in a way. Um, uh, I do think you need foundational skills. There are only a handful of people that are out of the womb with visual gifts. A lot of it
Sure.
needs to be learned and nurtured, I think, and practice and till it's like second nature. But charisma, charm, um, very key, and understanding people. And again, you will learn from your mistakes early on. I think we all do. If you don't, and I never stopped learning. I don't stop learning now. Even, as I review things to say, I can think of things. I'm haunted by photo shoots that I like, "Ah, fuck, I wish I would have done this differently." Or, like, again, trust your gut. The gut instinct for a creative person is a very important thing to listen to. Um, Understanding yourself and all those things are good. Not, you know, not just yeah, if your gut feeling, if your hunches aren't good, like, trust that. Try to understand that a little bit. That might be a big ticket into a big way in to figuring out how to make something better or to fix something. Um, when I think of like I knew this wasn't going to work out. They usually didn't. Not that I'm jinxing myself, but I had a gut feeling that like this idea wasn't great, you know?
And I think perception of just paying attention, noticing all the details, like
Yeah.
this things that's tough to practice, but like when you're on a set and you have a makeup artist that's worked with this person for a long time or a publicist, I was always trying to like, I could hear all these conversations going on around, even though I'm focusing on this. It's like, you'll know from a makeup artist, like, oh, they hate that side. Oh, they don't want to do that. And it's like knowing that it's a team of people from your assistants, your digital tech, creative director, everyone on the set is there ideally to make a great image for whatever it is you need. And I think that's the thing that people need to learn, that it's like, yeah, you're hitting the button, but it's everyone
It is
together
a
to
team
make
effort. That's
greatness.
that's the production thing that I think is so key. That photographer is the general there. And sometimes they're a very loud general, and you are hiring for that. And then, again, photographers can be very magnetic, you know, big reputations, all that sort of stuff. And but they're usually really good at commanding a room and commanding respect of of a person. Um, but yeah, I mean, details are so key, and thinking about every aspect of the image from top to bottom, I think will help. Like from like again, what they're standing on to the color of the paint, the color of the paper. Everything means something. So like nothing's an arbitrary decision in a way. So,
Hmm.
and I think when you have budgets, it forces you in a different way. But like, yeah, just color. What are they wearing? You know, what are they wearing that makes them feel comfortable? Like, and listening to them. Um,
Do you find
yeah.
that
How do you
the
make things better? How do you make things? How do you sometimes again the solutions are in not happening on the set that day, but uh, are observed. And sometimes in television, you learn something that went wrong in season one, and in season two, you do better in season two. Um, because you've listened, or you have more money to spend, or someone told you on season one that they didn't have money for this, and when you got it back and they weren't happy, and then on season two you say, well, you aren't happy for this, so this year we're going to have to spend some money on clothing. That happened with Rizzoli and Isles. Let's say season one, we shot them. No one wanted to spend that much money. We spent a lot of money, but it's sort of like, all right, they're going to bring the clothes from the show. The clothing that's on a show is not always very good. It's practical. It's not Fendi. It's not Prada. They can't afford to do that for a television show, especially, a TNT show back in the day. And I remember everyone, oh, I don't like the pants that she's wearing. And I don't like them either. But it was character. But for season two, I remember convincing Trisha, let's hire a wardrobe stylist. And like for their clothing, let's get Dolce and Gabbana. Let's get a Dolce and Gabbana jacket. Let's get, let's get those kind of boots. Let's get, something that's like high end. So it's still in character, but it's just an elevated way to do it. But the thing about that people don't forget about good hair and makeup and things, and that's something, Jeremy, we learn on set working, is that like though, the best hair and makeup, you see the best hair and makeup in fashion shoots. And again, it's all about those details. You'll never see bad make. You may not like the makeup, but it's rarely technically bad. It's not television makeup, that you have to fight, which is like there to blot out shine, and so forth. It's a very important creative thing. Makeup, nails, hair, but better clothing is better fabric. Better fabric reflects light better. Better fabric is tailored better. It looks better on camera. You know, that all those things are so key to making a good picture. Um, and I learned that over time. Oh, let him just come as you are, and I'd get the pictures back, and I would go to New York, and they said, yeah, I like it. I don't like what he's wearing, though. Yeah, well, we didn't have the money for a budget. Well, Michael, you got to do better, you know, culling down his wardrobe and finding something, you know. I'm distracted by that, blah, blah, blah. Lesson noted, never forgot it, And I think, yeah, you have to learn, but you just have to shoot a lot. One other thing is shoot editorial if you can. Shoot for free. The good thing about editorial is that like you own the picture. You may work for nothing, but you own it, but you get practice. You have like if you're working for free, you know, like on something small, like you have room to experiment, and that might be really, really good for you. And I would say experiment and push yourself on stuff and test lighting you know try not to be a tail wagging the dog with stuff like I think you can be influenced by things. Copying is something else. That's you can if that's what the goal is. If the goal is to do Rembrandt, yes, you want to learn how to do Rembrandt lighting. Yeah, you really need to do Rembrandt lighting. You know, um, I'm trying to think, Jeremy. What am I forgetting? In a way,
No, I think that's it's like, yeah, it's like you all the time you use stuff as references, but you're bringing your own life experience, our combined life experience into this thing to change it from something we've learned from another shoot or
right?
something that's specific for this show. So it's like, yeah, you're taking all these different elements of your life and character and putting it into this image, even if you are using a Rembrandt lighting as your reference. But
Yeah,
then you're tweaking it in a certain
it's
way.
it's yeah, it's the twist. It's the twist. That's what makes it smart, is the twist. And that's a good creative director or a good photographer with the idea. It's sort of like, this idea works for this retro idea or this homage or whatever you're doing. It feels natural and organic and things. One other thing that's really changed, I think, with photography is the ability now with digital and with faster shutter speeds and with like stuff is that like there's really a hybrid between like portraiture and lifestyle in a way that's never been that way. We can just go out and find shots and do them, and they don't have to be so set up. You know, you can have one light, and you can just shoot natural light these days, and it looks beautiful, it's sharp, and it's not grainy. Couldn't really do that. When I first started doing covers, covers couldn't be 35 millimeter unless it was a movie still. And even then, it couldn't be a movie still that was pushed two stops. You know, now nothing's really grainy unless you're adding grain, if anything, half the time to
Mhm.
make it feel more filmic. But all that stuff I think is important, and embracing the ability to move around a little bit and to not be so stiff. I think energy is a good thing. I mean, again, photography is everywhere. Everybody is walking around with, for all intents and purposes, a professional camera, that takes beautiful images. Um, there have been Time magazine covers that have been shot with an iPhone, and other things, New York Times, Sunday magazine covers. So, there's so much of that. So, but again, how do you make it, how do you make it special? Everyone's taking pictures. How do you make yours? How do you elevate yours that it's special and doesn't look like it was shot by anyone with an iPhone. Um,
And
I,
that takes
I think
time, right?
that
To
takes
to
time, but I
develop
do think
somebody's
it's
style.
obvious. It's obvious when you see good photo work about what they do, and it's that it's a special something, And again, it's the things you know. It's the things you add to it, in the idea or the story and such that's there. But it's a taste level too. When I taught at Art Center, I would give people an assignment to shoot something on location. What are the parameters? Well, make it an interesting picture. Well, I would see who put a lot of thought into it and who didn't. You know, um, and so like I do, we would sometimes talk of some of the other instructors. We would talk and we would discuss how's so and so doing. Oh yeah, he's good. I don't think he sees it. And yeah, sometimes the taste, you can't teach taste. So like, where do you get that? You develop taste. You can learn to have better taste. You can look at things and notice that like, I guess yeah, the whole aspirational nature of celebrity photography and portrait photography is really important in that, yeah, you're trying, you're not there to shoot reality half the time. We're not doing documentary stuff. And even the documentary stuff is a, it's shot in black and white high contrast. you know it's documentary, but it's not documentary, in a way. There's still an element of like art into those images. um
Well, because you've said it before,
yeah.
right? One of the most important things for the celebrity is that they look good, right? So if you have somebody in
Yes.
that's coming into that world with a style that just doesn't lend itself to people looking great on camera, that may be not the best style for
Correct.
entertainment photography.
But I think a photographer that doesn't know that that lens choice is not flattering is a warning sign for me.
It's a problem.
Like, you know, and I've dealt with that. Like, and then I say, can you just, and sometimes it's an easy conversation. You just like go back 6 inches. I'm just feeling like a little too much distortion there, you know or just I'm a big person, raise the camera up. I like to be more, a little more Dan Winters eye level. I think that's very
Hmm.
modern. That was very Avedon in a way. And Penn, they were direct. I mean, John Deacon, just so many great photographers. They didn't get into that dated sort of advertising portraiture of a baseball player on the diamond, shot
Hmm.
low. And then everybody was shot low, like thinking that that's going to make it. Yeah, that does make it larger in life, heroic, but it's also not very flattering, and it's also really dated you know um
Yeah.
so
And
yeah, I mean, I
it's
think
cyclical, right? Like there's things that are
things
dated
change.
that then people will stop doing, and then eventually it'll be fresh because people haven't done it in a while.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, there are color techniques that come and go sometimes.
Hmm.
There's lots of it. There's some stuff that isn't never going to make a comeback. I feel,
Yeah. Some
with
things we probably hope
modeled,
don't make a
modeled,
comeback.
modeled backgrounds, browns and yellows, the very warm tone stuff. I mean, movies aren't even made that way anymore.
Hmm.
When directors remaster their movies on DVD, they lately, or Blu-ray, 4K, they kind of tinge them a little blue teal. Like they get rid of like the tendency of film and the lighting equipment out there to be a little overly warm or magenta, and they're
Hmm.
they're 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 futzing with stuff to make it cooler, do more like the whole Zack Snyder shit, like make it desaturated and cold and more metallic. James Cameron has done it. Fincher has done it. You know, but again, pops of color are important. I happen to love color. Um, in simple ways. I did that a lot with TBS. Stuff was like, just bright blues and reds for everything. It made it very, easy to code it in a sense. But there are also pleasing, fun colors, and they're eye-catching colors. I mean, there were studies about why certain colors work and not. So I'd say one other thing, Edward, that's like really key for people is like, just again, look at magazines, movie covers, look at graphic design, see how images are being used. They're rarely not just there. There's
Hmm.
type on them. How is type enhancing that? Like, a photographer needs to think about how is this going to be used and ask those questions. Um, that will determine like how you may be photographing it, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, to leave space for something, or depending on how
yeah,
the set is built, like yeah, just thinking about those things while you're shooting. If you know what the final, how much type is going to be on there, what's going to be shot, then that makes a big
yeah.
difference.
Yeah, and so understanding that and just knowing that, like, no, this is not just a picture for an Instagram gallery, but you know, it's going to be a tile on the Xfinity page for this picture. Or I shot my friend's band, and they're putting a song out on iTunes, and it needs to be a little thing that's like this big,
Hmm.
and the lead singer is super handsome and cool looking, so it's only going to be about him, or the name of the album is X. Those are all those things. It's just, there's a lot to juggle, and no one gets it immediately. But those are the constant, endless stream of variables and details that you get that are thrown at you in conceiving things. And, that a good photographer after a while, like understands, what's being asked of them in context of this, what a good creative director, again, absorbs the project, puts it in a place that makes it easy to execute, etc. You know,
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael. I think we're going to wrap it up here. We're at over an
I
hour.
didn't forget anything. I think
Well,
I
There's
got
one
everything.
there's one very important thing
Tell
that
me,
is
tell me.
always have good music on set.
Well, we talked about that. Like having a set that is fun, that even to the bare minimum has a little food and snackage on it, water available, good music to get people in a good mood is great. Yeah, I would say we were rarely shooting people to like, and here's a little. There is always something about like not not making people look grim or overly broody. It was like people can be serious but not grim. But and then for that you don't want to put on Michael Jackson, but like music could put people at ease. And also, like, I used to do a little research, what kind of music do you like it, but music is a great thing to like. I had to do a shoot with Clint Eastwood once on a Sunday. He was coming over. We were shooting the cast, I think, for Flags of Our Fathers, or one of those ones. The one with Adam Beach and Ryan Phillippe and
Mm,
a few others. I forgot the name of it. Flags of Our Fathers? Is
think
that what
so,
it is?
yeah.
Flags of Our Fathers. And it was on a Sunday. And we were shooting, and Clint was coming in for the cover, which we didn't have him a lot of time. I think we had him maybe from door to door, maybe 45 minutes or whatever. But I read about Clinton's love of jazz. So I had some great old jazz CDs. And I think I walked up when it was time for a shoot, and I said Miles Davis or Art Blakely. And I think he said Art Blakely, and famous big bop, bebop, stuff. And I put that on, and I remember he was getting his portrait taken, and he was tapping his feet. Yeah, and I always liked, doing that in a way, like, just reading the room a little bit, making somebody happy. It shows that they paid attention a little bit, and to that. Yeah, I don't know, again, there's having a professional set. Look, you're a professional photographer. You have to execute and come away with a picture. I'm hiring someone that has to deliver. Um, there aren't really that many second chances given in that. Generally, it's like if you fuck up, you're done with things. So there's pressure, but that's being a professional in a way. I've used this analogy before. You go to the dentist knows, for the most part, knows how to fix your teeth. You go to a mechanic, he knows how to diagnose your car and fix it. The plumber comes over, you got something wrong, he knows how to fix it. And then you're a professional photographer. You're going to be hired to like deliver the things that these people need for their campaign, for their brochure, for their album, for their flyer, for their website, for their whatever they're doing, their presentations, the stuff is endless. And you wanna make them happy. You want to give them more, not less. They want the experience to be pleasant. They don't want to feel ripped off. Um, you don't want to feel ripped off either, but we can talk about that another time, the whole business part of it.
Yes.
But I think the being the professional and being serious about it as a livelihood is important. Moshe Bracha, a photographer who I worked with a lot at EW and who I loved, when he started doing some Sky Vodka ads in the 90s, they were revelations to me because again the details were good. The casting, like, if you're shooting actors and models, the casting is so key. you know his fabrics, the clothing, that you should look those up, those Sky Vodka ads that he did, and Nike Airwalk ads that he did during the 90s. They were amazing. He was one of the hottest in demand guys. um, but he once said, like, you get out of school and it's fun, and then you get a family, and then you realize you got to make a living, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that does, that changes how your approach to things a little bit. And it's a serious business. It's your livelihood. You can't fuck up because that could have really serious, consequences. In any business that we're in, you have to really make more right decisions than wrong decisions. And that applies to coaches and football, and all that sort of stuff. One other thing for starting out photographers, I talked about that, but I think find a mentor in a way, because the coaching analogy is important. I think Patrick Mahomes still likes to be coached hard. I had
Hmm.
heard on talk radio shows. Guys like to be coached, and I think like finding a mentor is a good thing. A collaborator. It's a mute. They make you you want to hear. I want to tell a photographer, you know what, the smartest decision they made today is hiring you. It made me look good, and vice
Hmm.
versa. You like, I love working with you. You always have great ideas on set, and you have these great references, and it's so much fun. I think nurture those types of relationships. Um, Among collaborators, being retouchers, post people, assistants, all that stuff. You want everyone to help make you better. You shouldn't be afraid of hiring someone that knows more than you. You shouldn't be afraid of hiring a lighting technician that could take your lighting another level. Like the good photographers that I know, they're the director. Martin Scorsese is not holding the Steadicam. He has the idea, So you want to become that. You're not a one man operation. I think there are
Hmm.
some photographers that forget that they want to do everything. No, hire someone that maybe you can learn from something. Work with a collaborator that may have better ideas than you. Um,
Yeah.
and so forth. And even for me, for a creative director, hire a great photographer that like brings more to the project than simply is in my head or what the sketches or things are.
Yeah.
So
I like
anyway,
your point about using a coach, right? I feel like everybody at some point or another needs somebody, even if it's somebody just to hold you accountable with some of the things that you're doing.
yeah,
What are you shooting? How's it
accountable seems
going? Those kind
harsh,
of things.
but yeah, I think look, that's why editors exist. Hemingway
Hmm.
had an editor. Salinger had an editor. Just Fitzgerald had an editor. There is someone that hovers over that to sort of like they're there to make things better. Really, a photo editor should be on a set, a creative director to make things better, to not get in the way. Like I said, the more work I have to do, the more tension there is. It's like conducting in music. A conductor, when he's conducting a major performance, he's not making it up on stage that night. They've rehearsed that for 4 performances, without an audience. They know the tempos. They know that I want this one to go a little bit longer at the end of this, So it's preparation. The preparation is a really important thing. I don't think, but all those things I think make the improvisation easier. It doesn't work against it. Being overly prepared and storyboarded is too rigorous for me. I don't think you ever want to rule out the happy accidents and the happy accidental. Um, that can come from that creative partnership between a photographer and an actor, between what the light does, between just walking around and seeing something. Oh my God, the light is hitting your face there. Come closer. Gosh, I mean, we did that. We sort of did that with Holly in a way. We found that we had an idea and we found a perfect thing, and again, that's the adage of the light being prop, but that was like that was all film noir references because they didn't have the budget for anything that could physically say mystery, so we implied mystery and tension through interesting lighting that that worked well.
So,
I don't
Edward,
know.
that was for a show called Playboy Murders with Holly Madison. We were in Las
Amazing.
Vegas in a studio. The key art that we had a seamless setup. We had all these things. We had these ideas. As we're walking around, we saw this like ray of light coming through a window, hitting this white wall and creating this like shaft of black shadow around it. We went over there. We had one bounce card. That ended up being the key art for the show. Like
That's
we did
great.
Yeah.
all this other stuff. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That is, they
And
added
I
that
have
background
tons of
in.
film reference,
Yeah.
I had like tons of film noir
Hmm.
reference that I made the deck to show the people at ID to say, this is my thoughts to add some mood. And we did it a couple of different ways, but like we lucked out. We thought maybe we'd have to create this a different way. And there it
Right.
was, just on a window. We were hoping it, and it was there, but it was a pre-sold idea. And again, there's your film, film
Hmm.
noir reference in a way
Hmm.
that comes from that. Um, and there were, you know, there's another variation of your shot, I believe, you know, um, just utilized a different way. Uh,
I just pulled that actually. Yeah. Oh, I haven't seen that
that,
one yet.
that
I have that. That's the original on the white
that's
background.
how it looked on the in cam.
Hmm.
That's in camera. Yeah. So like, again, I like that, but that was like, again, and then there's a little film background because, I liked movies. I liked American avant-garde film and experimental movies, and I liked how they were freewheeling and things like that. I liked John Cassavetes. I liked that stuff. So I enjoyed hiring photographers that were really good at just like, let's just walk. Let's just walk. Me and Kiefer Sutherland are gonna walk, Anthony Mandler would say. And he'd come back with something great, you know? I mean, Anthony's, gone on to direct features and some of the best videos by Lana Del Rey and Bieber and, Rihanna and things like that. But he was fun to work with at EW. And his process was very, very different than most because, he would come really late and he was one of those guys it was all personality. It's all
Hmm.
personality. His prep was like, I'm going to talk to them. He knew what the light was going to do, and he would walk around and get something interesting. But he was mostly just like he knew all these guys. Um, there's again so many different ways to do it. You know, so many different ways uh, to 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 come away with a great image, and over a career you kind of you know them all, but it's it's different on every shoot, isn't it, Jeremy? And every shoot's its own animal and its own challenges or so on.
And I think it's just taking all of your experience that you've had, all the things, and putting it your style, making sure that you're doing it the way that you have been hired to do it and
Hmm.
delivering on the thing is the best way to look at it. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Listening is a good thing. Listening skills are good, I think in general. But I think understanding human nature too is sort of like, I think, gosh, Art Streiber and I would talk and we would say, I think it was his line or whatever, that I should have been working for the United Nations or sometimes because I'd be on EW. And again, a magazine sometimes had an antagonistic relationship with a star, and the stars and the publicist would come, oh, he's not going to do that, he's not going to do that, and I would try to get stuff to happen, and um I had to be there to broker it all a little bit. And I remember, like I think I maybe we joked and said, yeah, like the next jobs for us is not photography, but it's like, Middle East negotiations because, you had to do that. But I think that's, like that doesn't have to be the photographer. It sometimes does. Again, the charming photographers, Matthew Ralston could talk anybody into anything, you know. Um, you know,
one last story about that before we go, because
yeah.
I give you the credit going back to the music. And it was a similar scenario. It was I was shooting Anthony Bourdain for CNN. And
Hmm.
they were like, he doesn't want to do this. He's here for something else. And we're going to bring him in. You got a few minutes. And I found his playlist on iTunes back when they
Oh,
posted
great.
those celebrity playlists.
Remember those.
He came in, I had 3 minutes. All of a sudden, I had his playlist going, and he looked over at me. He goes, where did you get my music? And then I got 5 more minutes with him because
Yeah.
I put that preparation and we talked about it and everything. And it was,
Yeah.
I mean, I give you credit because it was something where I learned from
Yeah,
you of
I
like
put that
making
on
sure you have
everybody's
this.
radar. That was
Yeah.
always the thing. Let's put on music and gosh, I mean it's fun. It is fun. But yeah, you want energy. Again, photographers with energy got energy out of people by screaming and yelling and stuff like that, but by blasting music at photo shoots. And that's the joy of photo shoots, is that they can be, parties sometimes, because like you're not shooting sound, so you can do that. The TV promo people have a tougher job, because they're working, in absolute silence, people reading lines. And yeah, I don't know, but again, even though, like, again, everyone has one of these, but you guys create elevated work, and that stands out in people that care. There's a reason that, like, they're still hiring a lot of photographers to do stuff. Is that
Mhm.
it's it's advertising. There's something subtle manipulation going on, and photography and selling the aspirational elevated is very key to that. And you guys can make things. We're there to make things better than really what they are. If you think about it, advertising is lying to some degree. You're making this show look better. You're making whatever, cooking food look better. Everything's heightened a little bit. That's what all art is. All art is a heightened version of,
Reality.
something. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you for doing this, and thank you for everything
Thank you
you've
for
ever
asking
done
me.
Yeah, this
for
was great. Thank
helping
you, Michael.
me and us and
Uh,
career wise, and continuing to help me. And I enjoy our dinners together and everything else. But we're going to
yeah.
have you back on
Well,
another time to talk, like
yeah,
you
let's
said,
pin
more
it down.
business
Let's,
stuff.
yeah, we can talk business, or we can really just analyze, do a couple of case studies, and, give a case study of something that worked out great, case study of something that, like, I wish I had back. I mean, there are so many things, but again, you never stop learning. You can't be shut out from learning and being better. You evolve as an artist. And again, I haven't been working on this sort of stuff since 2023. And some of the movies that I've watched since 2023, I wish I had projects that I could, like, oh man, I saw something in this that would have been great for X, you know? So, but I don't know, but you guys still have the ability to do that. So it's kind of awesome.
Well, thanks, Michael. We really
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.
All
Have a
right.
good
Sam.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bye,
we'll talk
everyone.
soon. Take it easy.